Turn off the light. Noah won't be home tonight. That line still rings in my head like thunder that never stops. I had just walked down the hall, holding a tray of fruit and coffee, when I saw my son's fiancée standing too close to my husband. Her hands rested on his shoulders. His fingers were around her waist. My breath stopped. I froze behind the half-closed door, afraid even my heartbeat could give me away. For a second, I thought I was dreaming, but the silk robe she wore was the same one I had gifted her the night before, the one I had embroidered with her name, Tessa. I stepped back, shaking, and then I saw my son Noah at the end of the hall. He was silent, his face pale but calm. He whispered, "Mom, I already know." My world tilted. He took my hand, guided me to the back porch, and told me what he had discovered, something even worse than what I had seen. That's how my story began. My name is Marion Whitaker. I'm 66 years old, and I own the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn, a small brick inn tucked against Pine Woods near Asheville, North Carolina. For 40 years, I have cooked breakfast, washed sheets, and smiled for guests who called this place peaceful. I built this life with my husband Gerald step by step, brick by brick. But that morning, the peace was gone. Noah told me the truth in a voice that trembled with anger. For months, Tessa and Gerald had been planning to sell our inn behind my back. They forged my signature on papers, created a fake company called Whitaker Hearth LLC, and transferred parts of the property to that name. Tessa worked for a big corporation that buys old family homes, flips them, and sells them to luxury investors. To her, my home was just a project. To Gerald, it was an escape plan. The wedding they were planning was just a way to make everything look clean. The moment Noah told me, I felt the floor vanish beneath my feet. 40 years of work, love, and trust turned into a lie. I remember staring at my hands, wrinkled, worn, scarred by years of cooking, and wondering how those same hands could have built something others want to steal. I didn't cry. I went cold. When your heart shatters at 66, tears don't come first. Plans do. Noah said he'd already contacted an attorney who could help us prove the forgery. But he warned me, "Mom, you'll have to pretend you don't know. Smile, cook, act normal. We need time." I nodded. Because I had kept the hearth burning through storms before. I could do it again. That evening, I made dinner like nothing happened. Gerald sat across from me, talking about pipe leaks and breakfast orders. Tessa laughed about flowers for the ceremony. I smiled, but every sound felt like knives scraping plates. Inside, I wrote every word in my mind, every look, every nervous twitch. When they went upstairs, I sat alone in the kitchen, listening to the clock tick and the mountain wind move through the pines. I thought about all the years I believed love and honesty were enough. I thought about my mother's words, "When people stop respecting you, don't shout. Watch." So I watched. Each day after that, I wrote notes in a little brown book I kept inside the flower tin. Times when Gerald left. Numbers he called. Times Tessa whispered on the porch. Every piece mattered. I greeted guests with warm smiles, flipped pancakes, served coffee, and in between, built my quiet wall of proof. Noah handled the documents with the lawyer. I handled the house with my heart. The plan was simple. Wait for them to make one mistake big enough to end it all. But pretending to be blind in your own home hurts like slow fire. Sometimes I caught Gerald watching me with guilt flickering behind his eyes. Sometimes Tessa would hug me sweetly and whisper, "You're like the mother I never had." Each time, my stomach twisted, but my face never showed it. At night, I'd walk through the hall, touching the walls I painted years ago, whispering, "I will not lose you." The Blue Ridge Hearth was more than a building. It was every year of my life carved into wood and brick. I remembered the winters when Gerald and I stayed up to fix frozen pipes, the summers when Noah chased fireflies by the porch, the first Christmas when I baked pies for strangers who became friends. Now those same walls hid betrayal. One afternoon, Noah and I met the lawyer Avery Chen in town. He was calm, sharp-eyed, and confident. He said, "Mrs. Whitaker, your signature has been forged. These papers are evidence of fraud." His words felt heavy, but right. For the first time, I saw a path through the fog. Avery planned to file an emergency order to freeze any sale or transfer of yen. He warned, people like this panic fast when the truth comes out. You must stay alert. I went home stronger but quieter. The next morning, I baked waffles as usual. The air smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Guests laughed in the dining room. When Tessa walked in, she smiled wide. "Good morning, Mom Whitaker," she said, pouring orange juice. I smiled back. "Morning, dear. How's the wedding planning?" She froze for half a heartbeat, then answered too fast. "Perfect. Everything's perfect." That tiny stutter told me everything I needed to know. Later, I stood at the window, watching her outside, phone pressed to her ear, whispering words I couldn't hear. I took a photo through the glass. Every small piece mattered. That night, I told Noah they're rushing something. He nodded, eyes tired. Then we moved faster. The next day, he installed small cameras in the office and near the safe. He said they'd record automatically if anyone tried to open drawers or the cabinet. "If they take one wrong step, we'll have proof," he told me. I said they will, because greed never hides for long. Days passed heavy but steady. Gerald grew tense. Tessa acted too sweet, and I kept smiling, feeding them the warmth they thought was blindness. Inside, I was sharper than ever. Then, one rainy afternoon, a black SUV pulled up outside the inn. 2 men in suits got out. Tessa ran to greet them, calling them Mr. Barrow and Mr. Mendez. My hands went cold. Summit Vista Holdings had arrived. They walked through my rose garden, talking about renovations and profit margins. Barrow said this place could make millions once modernized. I looked him in the eye and answered softly, "It already makes something money can't buy, peace." He smiled like he didn't understand. He didn't. None of them did. As we stood on the porch, Tessa laughed, pretending to host a friendly tour. I waited for the right moment, then asked, "And who has the legal right to sign these contracts?" The men looked at Gerald. He froze. Tessa smiled too fast. Noah stepped forward and said firmly, "The legal owners are Marian and Noah Whitaker." Silence. That silence was the sound of their plan cracking. Barrow closed his briefcase. Tessa's face went pale. The SUV left in quiet defeat. That night, thunder rolled across the mountains. Gerald paced the living room, jaw tight. Tessa texted nonstop, whispering, "They're getting impatient." I wrote that line in my book word for word. I knew the storm outside wasn't the only one coming. When I went to bed, Gerald sat on the edge, staring at the floor. "Marian, you don't understand," he said. "We could have been rich. We could have left all this behind." I turned off the lamp and whispered, "Some of us don't measure life in dollars." He didn't answer. The next morning, I saw him staring out at the rain-soaked yard like a man already lost. Later, Avery called. "The court granted the emergency freeze," he said. "No one can sell or transfer the property now." Relief filled me like sunlight after weeks of dark. But Avery added, "It also means they'll panic. Keep your guard up." That afternoon, I caught Tessa packing 2 new suitcases. She smiled too bright. "Just planning the honeymoon early," she said. I nodded, knowing it was a lie. That night, Gerald came to me again. "Dinner out, just us?" he asked, voice too smooth. My heart thudded. He wanted me away from the house. "All right," I said, smiling. But I wasn't going anywhere blind. Before leaving, I whispered to Noah, "Record everything." He nodded, calm and ready. The trap was set. As Gerald drove down the wet road, I watched the mountains fade behind mist and knew that somewhere in the dark, truth was finally walking toward us. I wasn't scared anymore. The trail had burned the fear out of me. All that was left was resolve. My husband thought he was taking me to dinner. But what he didn't know was that tonight, the walls of the Blue Ridge hearth would hear every secret he tried to hide. And when the storm broke, it wouldn't be thunder shaking our home. It would be justice knocking on our door. The storm finally hit. Wind slammed against the car windows as Gerald drove through the mountain road, pretending everything was normal. His hands gripped the wheel too tight, veins standing out under his skin. I stared straight ahead, calm on the outside, but inside my heart was beating like a drum. I knew tonight everything would break. He talked about the restaurant we used to love years ago, trying to sound gentle, but his voice shook at the edges. I smiled faintly and said, "It's been a while since we went out, hasn't it?" He nodded too fast. He thought I was still the trusting wife. He didn't know my son was at home right now, watching every corner of the house through the small hidden cameras we'd set up. Gerald thought this was just a dinner, but it was really the night his lies came home to face him. The road wound tighter, trees bending under the wind, rain splattering the windshield. He glanced at me and said, "Marianne, I've made mistakes, but you'll understand soon. I just wanted a better life for us." His words hit like stones, but I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer. Reached the restaurant. Soft lights glowed behind fogged windows. He parked, wiped his hands on his pants, and gave me a nervous smile. Inside, candles flickered, and the smell of rosemary and roast meat filled the air. The waiter led us to a corner table. Gerald poured wine into my glass, his hand trembling slightly. "To new beginnings," he said. I lifted my glass slowly, looked him straight in the eyes, and said quietly, "I know everything." His face froze. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then the color drained from his cheeks. "What are you talking about?" he asked, but the words stumbled. I leaned forward. "The fake company, the forged signatures, the money you and Tessa moved behind my back, the flights, the accounts in your name. I know it all." His eyes widened in shock. His hand slipped, the glass tilted, red wine spilling across the white cloth like blood. He stammered, "Marianne, I can explain." But there was nothing left to explain. This can't be reasoned with. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and said, "Dinner's over." My phone buzzed. It was Noah. His voice was urgent. "Mom, they're packing bags and pulling papers from the safe. Avery called the police. They're on the way." My heart raced, but my voice stayed calm. "Keep the cameras rolling, son. Don't let them leave." Gerald stood too, confused and panicking. "Marian, what's happening?" he demanded. I turned to him and said, "Justice." He froze, realizing too late that the storm was already above him. I walked out of the restaurant, leaving the smell of wine and regret behind. Outside, thunder cracked across the ridge. Gerald followed me, shouting my name, but I kept walking toward the car. The wind whipped my hair across my face. I opened the door, sat in, and said coldly, "Drive home." He hesitated, then obeyed. The road back to the inn twisted in rain and darkness. His breath came shallow, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He tried to speak, but every word died in the sound of the storm. Finally, he whispered, "I never meant to hurt you." I said nothing. My eyes stayed on the road ahead, glowing faintly with red and blue lights. The police were already there. As we turned into the lane, the Blue Ridge hearth stood lit like a stage, flashing lights reflecting off the wet brick, rain falling in sheets, and uniformed officers moving through the porch. My heart pounded, not in fear but relief. The truth had come. Gerald stopped the car, stunned. He stared as two officers guided Tessa down the steps, her wrists cuffed, her hair wet and tangled. She screamed, "You can't do this. I didn't steal anything." But the evidence spoke louder than her voice. The open suitcase on the porch glimmered with jewelry and documents. Noah stood beside Lieutenant Ramirez, rain soaking his jacket. He looked strong, older somehow. I stepped out of the car. Rain hit my face, cold and hard, but I didn't flinch. Gerald whispered, "Oh, God." His knees went weak. The officer turned, saw him, and nodded. "Mr. Whitaker, step forward, please." Gerald looked at me, his eyes wide, pleading. "Marianne, don't let them." I raised a hand. "You built this storm yourself." The officer read his rights as cuffs clicked around his wrists. The sound was final. The rain poured harder. Tessa cried out, "He promised me," but her voice was lost under the storm. Noah came to me, put his arm around my shoulder, and said softly, "It's over, Mom." I looked at him, at my son, who had carried this weight with me, and whispered, "No, son, it's just beginning. Now we rebuild." Ramirez approached, professional but kind. "Mrs. Whitaker, the evidence your son provided sealed the case. We found forged papers, hidden accounts, and transfers from your husband's company to Summit Vista. You've done well keeping calm." I nodded, my throat tight. I did what I had to. Behind him, officers carried out boxes, documents, USB drives, jewelry bags, all tagged and sealed. The flashing lights cast long shadows across the porch, the same porch where I once served morning coffee. It didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like survival. As the police cars pulled away, I stood under the eaves, rain dripping from my hair, and whispered, "This house still stands." Noah squeezed my hand. "It's yours again, Mom." I smiled faintly. It always was. That night, the storm eased, leaving the air clear and sharp. The pine trees swayed gently, whispering like they knew what had happened. Inside, I sat by the fireplace, listening to the soft crackle of wood. The fire's warmth felt different, clean, earned. Noah sat across from me, quiet, staring into the flames. "You think he'll try to fight it?" he asked. "Maybe," I said, "but lies don't grow roots in truth." He nodded, understanding. We didn't speak again. The silence between us was peaceful for the first time in months. The next morning, the sun broke through the mist. I stepped outside, the air smelling of wet earth and pine. The Blue Ridge hearth looked strong again, every brick glowing faintly in the light. I whispered to the house, "We made it." But I knew it wasn't truly over. Betrayal leaves cracks that light can't fill right away. There were still courts, lawyers, and public whispers to face. The news spread fast through Asheville. Reporters came knocking, their questions sharp, their cameras ready. "Mrs. Whitaker, how does it feel to expose your husband and daughter-in-law?" one asked. I looked straight at him and said softly, "It feels like breathing after a long time." That was all. I didn't owe them my pain. I owed myself peace. Later that week, Gerald's lawyer called. He wanted to discuss settlement options. I told him to call my attorney. There was nothing left to discuss. The man I married had chosen money over love, and that choice had a price. Avery, our lawyer, handled everything with steady patience. He said, "They'll probably try to claim emotional pressure or misunderstanding." I smiled faintly. "They can try, but the papers speak the truth." Avery nodded. "They do. You built this case like you built your home, solid." His words meant more than he knew. I thanked him and went home, stopping by a bakery on the way. When I reached the inn, Noah was cleaning the porch, sweeping away the leaves and bits of broken glass from that stormy night. "It looks new again," I said. He smiled. "Almost." I handed him a pastry bag. "Breakfast." He laughed for the first time in weeks, and the sound filled the air like birdsong. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. Still, every night, when the house went quiet, I'd walk down the hall and pause outside the office door. That was where Noah had hidden the evidence, where the truth had lived, while lies ruled the rest of the house. I'd rest my hand on the doorknob, breathe deeply, and whisper, "Thank you." One evening, a car stopped at the gate. I looked out the window and saw a woman step out. She was tall, gray-haired, and in a neat coat. Her face looked tired but kind. When I opened the door, she introduced herself softly. "I'm Elaine Barlow, Tessa's mother." My stomach tightened, but I stayed calm. "Please come in," I said. We sat in the dining room, the same place where Tessa once talked about her wedding colors. Elaine wrapped her hands around the cup of tea I gave her. "Mrs. Whitaker, I came to apologize. I didn't raise her to be like this." But I failed to stop her. Her eyes filled with tears. I felt something shift in my chest, pity, not anger. "We all trust the people we love," I said. "Sometimes they choose the wrong path." She nodded slowly. "I just wanted you to hear it from me. I'm sorry for what she did." For a moment, we sat in silence. The clock ticked, and I realized something. No matter how much pain Tessa caused, she was still someone's child. A mother's sorrow has no borders. When Elaine left, I watched her car fade down the road and whispered, "We both lost something, didn't we?" That night, I sat by the fire again, looking at the flames dance. I thought about how easy it is to lose yourself chasing money, how love turns cold when greed walks in. But I also thought about how strong truth can be when it finally shows its face. Noah came in holding a mug of tea. "Mom," he said softly, "you saved this place. But what about you? What do you want to do next?" I smiled at him. "Live. That's all. Just live quietly and keep the fire burning." He nodded. "Then we'll do that together." In the following weeks, I filled the house with warmth again. Guests returned, unaware of the storm that had nearly taken everything. They smiled at the flowers on the porch, the smell of waffles in the air, the way the firelight touched the walls. The inn was alive again. But sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn, I'd hear the wind moving through the trees, and it would sound like whispers of everything that had happened. Not painful anymore, just reminders of what was won and what was lost. One morning, as sunlight spilled across the dining room, Noah looked at me and said, "Mom, we should tell the story one day. Maybe someone out there needs to hear it." I nodded. "Maybe one day, when the heart doesn't hurt anymore." He smiled. "Then maybe it's almost that day." Outside, the pines swayed gently, the sky clear for the first time in months. But I knew peace never stays forever. Life has a way of testing you again just when you start to breathe easy. Because one afternoon, a letter came in the mail with a prison stamp on the corner. Gerald's name on it. I held it in my hands, feeling the old ache return. The story wasn't done yet, and neither was my heart. I sat at the kitchen table, the same old oak table where I had shared breakfast with Gerald for over 40 years. The morning light came through the lace curtains, touching the letter with a soft gold glow. I didn't open it right away. My hand shook slightly as I traced the corner of the envelope. North Carolina State Prison was stamped in deep blue ink. I stared at his name, Gerald Whitaker, written in the same handwriting that used to sign my birthday cards, grocery lists, and love notes from decades ago. Now it carried the weight of betrayal, regret, and something else I wasn't ready to face. Noah came into the room quietly, holding a mug of coffee. "You gonna read it?" he asked softly. I nodded but didn't move. The paper felt heavier than it looked. I took a deep breath, broke the seal, and unfolded the letter. The first line made my throat close. "Marian, I don't deserve your time, but I hope you'll give me a few minutes of your heart. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I'm writing because for the first time in my life, I understand what I threw away." I stopped reading for a moment. My heart hurt, not with love, but with the strange ache of memories that still carried warmth under the ashes. I read on. "The cell is small. The nights are long. I've had a lot of time to think, and I realize the truth now. I was afraid. Not of you, but of getting old, of feeling useless, of being forgotten. When Summit Vista approached me, I saw a chance to be young again, to feel important, to build something new. But greed doesn't build, it destroys. Tessa fed that fear in me until I couldn't tell right from wrong. When I lost you, I lost the only real thing I ever built." The words blurred for a second as tears filled my eyes. I hadn't cried in months. But this time, it wasn't from anger. It was from exhaustion. He continued, "I heard Noah's voice in court when he spoke about the house, about you, about the truth. He sounded like the man I always wanted to be but never managed to become. You raised him right, Marian. I failed you both. I know it. I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to say it when it mattered most." I folded the paper halfway and sat back. The house was quiet except for the sound of the old clock ticking on the wall. Noah stood near the counter, watching me carefully. "What does he say?" he asked. I smiled faintly, though my chest felt tight. "He says he's sorry." Noah sighed, his jaw tense. "It's late for that." I nodded. "Yes, but maybe late is still better than never." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. I looked back at the letter and kept reading. They let me work in the prison workshop. I carve wood. It's strange how it reminds me of the years we built the inn. I remember your laugh when the paint spilled on the porch floor, the way you hummed when you cooked, the mornings when we didn't talk, but everything still felt right. I lost all that for numbers on a screen. I'll be released in 6 years, maybe less with good behavior. I don't expect a home waiting, but if one day you can think of me without hate, that will be enough. At the bottom was his signature. Strong, familiar, painful. For a long while, I sat there with the letter in my lap, staring out the window. The pines outside swayed softly in the morning wind, their green tips catching light. The same trees that had heard our vows, our arguments, our laughter. I whispered to them, "He's still trying to come home." Noah leaned against the counter. "What will you do with it?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "I'll keep it. Not for him, but for me. To remember where blindness leads." Noah nodded, then reached out and squeezed my shoulder. "You're stronger than anyone I know, Mom." I smiled, wiping a tear. "No, son." I just had to become strong. Weeks passed after that. The letter stayed in my desk drawer, folded neatly under old bills and receipts. Life at the inn moved forward. Guests came and went. The smell of pancakes and coffee filled the air again, and laughter returned to the hallways. I started to smile for real, not out of duty, but because peace had found its way back. One afternoon, I heard Noah talking with a young woman in the kitchen. Her name was Harper Quinn, an architecture researcher who had been staying at the inn for 3 weeks. Her laughter was warm, light, like spring rain. I watched through the doorway as she pointed at an old beam on the ceiling and said, "This joint structure is from the late 1800s. It's beautiful." Noah smiled in a way I hadn't seen in a long time, soft, honest. I quietly stepped away, not wanting to interrupt. Later at dinner, I asked him, "You like her, don't you?" He blushed slightly. "She's kind, Mom. Smart, too. And she listens." I smiled. "She sounds like someone who understands what home means." He nodded slowly. That night, for the first time in months, the inn felt light again. The walls didn't echo with old pain. They hummed with new beginnings. But peace never stays untested. A week later, I received another letter. This one wasn't from Gerald. It was from Summit Vista Holdings. My stomach dropped as I read the first lines. They were suing me for defamation and loss of corporate opportunity. My hands trembled. They claimed that by stopping the sale, I had damaged their projected profits. The audacity of it made me laugh bitterly. After everything they had done, they were still trying to take something from me. I called Avery immediately. He picked up on the second ring. "I saw the filing," he said calmly. "Don't worry. It's intimidation. They know they've lost the property, so they're trying to scare you into a settlement." I asked, "Can they win?" He chuckled softly. "Not a chance if we keep everything documented." "You kept your notes, right?" I smiled, glancing at the old notebook still tucked in my apron pocket. Every word. The court battle stretched on for months. Lawyers argued, papers piled up, but Avery was right. Truth stood taller. The judge dismissed their claim with prejudice, meaning they couldn't file it again. When he banged the gavel, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. Outside the courthouse, the wind was gentle, the sky clear. I looked up and whispered, "We did it, Gerald." Even if you weren't beside me, the house we built still stands. It was strange, talking to him like that, but I felt he could hear me somehow. After that victory, something in me changed. I started walking every morning before sunrise, down the path by the pines. The mountain air was cold and clean, carrying the smell of earth and sap. I'd stop at the small stone wall behind the inn, touch the rough edge, and whisper, "We're still here." Sometimes I'd see guests sitting on the porch with their coffee, smiling at the view, and I'd feel proud. The Hearth Inn was more than a business again. It was alive with stories. People said they could feel something when they walked in, a calm, a warmth. I knew what it was. It was the truth that had survived the storm. A few months later, I got a call from the local culinary school. They asked if I'd consider taking students for internships. We want them to learn from someone who understands both heart and discipline, the director said. I laughed softly. I don't know about that, but I can teach them pancakes. Within a week, 3 students joined me in the kitchen. Their laughter, their music, their energy, it all brought new life to the old house. I taught them how to knead dough, how to watch the color of butter as it melts, and how to cook not just for taste, but for comfort. One girl, a shy brunette named Leah, told me quietly this place feels like a grandmother's hug. I smiled and said that's exactly what it's supposed to feel like. That evening, Noah and Harper joined us for dinner. Harper had brought old photos of the inn she found in town records. She showed one from 1924, a black and white image of the porch with a woman standing proudly beside a wagon. Her name was Eliza Whitaker, Harper said. Your great-grandmother. My heart swelled. The same blood, the same porch, the same fire that refused to go out. I felt tears rise, but blinked them back. I guess the hearth really was meant to stay in the family, I whispered. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat by the fire with a cup of peach tea. I opened Gerald's letter again. This time, the words didn't sting. They settled softly. I thought about what he said, that he carved wood now. I imagined him shaping rough blocks into smooth forms, maybe trying to make something right with his hands. People can break things easily, but maybe they can rebuild too, even if only within themselves. I didn't know if I'd ever write him back. But I knew one thing: I no longer hated him. Hate ties you to the past. Forgiveness, even if it's silent, set you free. Days turned into weeks, and spring returned to Asheville. The garden bloomed again. Guests sat under the roses, children played on the steps, and laughter filled the air. I started a new habit. Each morning, I'd write a small note in my journal about one good thing: the smell of rain, a guest's smile, the sound of Noah's laughter. Slowly, those pages began to outweigh the ones filled with pain. One Saturday afternoon, Harper came into the kitchen holding her notebook. Mrs. Whitaker, she said excitedly, I've been studying the house's structure, and I think there's a hidden compartment under the west wall near the fireplace. I frowned. Hidden? She nodded. Maybe old builders used it to store ledgers or letters. My curiosity sparked. We moved the rug aside, pulled up a loose floorboard, and found a small wooden box, dusty but intact. Inside were yellowed papers, a few faded photos, and a small brass key. The papers were handwritten records from 1903, guest names, food costs, even short notes from travelers. At the bottom was a note in ink. A home is not the walls around us, but the hearts that keep its fire. I ran my fingers over the words, smiling. Even back then, they knew. Harper grinned. It's part of your story now. That night, I placed the brass key in a small frame beside the fireplace with a note underneath, found 2025. The hearth keeps its secrets, but only to protect its soul. Guests loved it. Some even left their own little notes of gratitude in a jar on the porch. The house had become more than shelter again. It was a story shared by everyone who entered. As for Noah and Harper, their friendship deepened. I'd see them walking under the pines, talking, laughing quietly. One evening, I saw them standing by the old fountain, the twilight soft around them, and I knew something gentle was blooming there. It made me smile. The world had taken so much from us, but it was giving something back. And me? I found peace in small things: the way morning light hit the window, the hum of bees in the garden, the sound of the kettle whistling just before boiling. The hearth had survived betrayal, greed, and storms. It had survived lies and fear. But most of all, it had survived because love, quiet, honest love, never really leaves a place built with it. Then, one early summer morning, another letter arrived. This one was thin, plain, almost hesitant. The handwriting wasn't Gerald's, it was Tess's. My hands went cold as I read her name. The postmark said Greenville Rehabilitation Center. I sat down slowly, the envelope trembling between my fingers. The last time I saw her, she was in handcuffs screaming through the rain. Now, years later, she was writing to me. My heart pounded, old pain stirring, but I took a deep breath. I had learned that facing the past is the only way to truly move forward. I looked out at the sunlight on the porch, at Noah laughing with Harper, and whispered, "All right, Tessa, let's see what you have to say." I slid my finger under the seal and opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper and a small photograph. The letter began with shaky handwriting. "Mrs. Whitaker, I know I'm the last person you ever want to hear from, but I've been in therapy for months, and they say I should take responsibility. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to tell you the truth about everything." I looked at the photo. It showed Tessa, younger, sitting beside her mother, Elaine, smiling with pride outside a small house. The same woman who had come to my porch months earlier to apologize? My eyes burned. Tessa's letter continued. "I didn't start out planning to hurt you. Summit Vista found me after my father's death. I was broke and scared. They offered money and a future if I could get your husband to sell. I told myself it was just business. But when I saw the way you treated me, with kindness, with trust, it made everything harder. I started to care, but by then it was too late. Gerald promised we'd both walk away rich and free. We were fools. When I saw the police that night, I knew it was over. Prison taught me what greed really costs. I've lost everything, but I want you to know Noel was the only person who ever looked at me with genuine care. Tell him I'm sorry for lying. Tell him I hope he's happy. I'll never forgive myself, but I'm trying to change." The last lines were almost unreadable from smudges of tears. "Thank you for the robe you gave me when I first came." I kept the embroidered cuff. It reminded me that I was once welcomed like family. I folded the letter, heart aching but calm. I whispered, "Maybe this is the real ending." For the first time, I felt no hatred left inside me, just quiet understanding. Some storms leave scars, but others leave lessons. That evening, I told Noah about the letter. He listened quietly, jaw tight. "Do you believe her?" he asked. I shrugged softly. "Maybe. But belief doesn't change the past. It just frees the heart." He nodded, his eyes gentle. "You're better than I'll ever be, Mom." I smiled, brushing his cheek. "No, son. You're already everything good that was left of Ruth, your parents." That night, as rain began to fall softly outside, I sat by the fire again. The inn creaked, the wind whispered through the pines, and I felt something I hadn't in years, complete peace. I closed my eyes, whispering to myself, the hearth still burns, but peace is never the end. Sometimes when you think the story has settled, life sends one last test to see what your heart is really made of. And mine was coming sooner than I knew, because one morning a visitor appeared at the gate who would change everything all over again. The visitor at my gate isn't who you think it is. I saw the figure standing in the morning mist, still and silent, wearing a light brown coat and holding something in their hands. The rising sun cast long shadows across the gravel path, and the air smelled of wet pine and dew. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. My heart slowed, then sped up again as I walked closer to the window. Noel was already outside sweeping the porch, but when he saw the figure, he froze. "Mom," he called softly, "someone's here to see you." I stepped onto the porch, my heart thudding slow and heavy. The figure turned, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. It was Gerald, my husband, the man who had destroyed my trust, my peace, and everything I had once believed in. He looked older now, his hair fully gray, face thinner, shoulders slightly bent. 6 years had changed him into someone I could barely recognize. His eyes met mine across the yard, cautious, pleading, filled with the kind of tired sorrow that only regret can carve into a person. Noah's jaw tightened. "What's he doing here?" he whispered. I raised my hand gently. "Let's hear him out first." Every step Gerald took toward me felt like the past rising again. He stopped halfway up the path, clutching his hat in his hands. "Marion," he said softly, his voice rough from years of silence. "I didn't mean to come uninvited. I was released 2 weeks ago. I just wanted to see if you were all right." His words hung in the air between us like fragile glass. I stayed quiet. Part of me wanted to tell him to leave. Another part wanted to finally understand the man I had loved for most of my life. "You shouldn't be here," Noah said firmly. "You have no right after what you did." Gerald nodded, shame flooding his face. You're right, son. I have no right. But I'm not here to take anything. I came to return something. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn leather box. He stepped forward and held it out toward me with shaking hands. This belonged to you, he said. I hesitated, then took the box. It was heavy, old, and smelled faintly of cedar. When I opened it, my breath caught. Inside lay my mother's silver brooch, the one she gave me on my wedding day, the one I thought I'd lost decades ago. I looked up at Gerald in disbelief. Where did you find this? His voice cracked. In the safe at the inn. I took it out years ago to have it polished for your birthday, but I never got the chance to give it back. It's been haunting me ever since. His eyes glistened. I don't expect forgiveness, Marion. I just needed you to have it again. Noah stepped closer, his voice sharp. You think a trinket can fix what you broke? Gerald lowered his gaze. No. I know nothing can fix it. I'm not asking for that. I'm just trying to do one right thing before I disappear. His words cut deep, not because they were manipulative, but because they sounded honest. Years ago, he would have made excuses. Today, he didn't. I studied his face for a long moment. Prison had stripped away his pride. What stood in front of me wasn't the man who betrayed me. It was the man who had finally faced the ruin he created. I nodded slowly. Thank you, I said quietly. He looked surprised, as if he hadn't expected even that. I turned to Noah. Go inside, son. He frowned. Mom, you can't. Please, I said gently, just give us a minute. Reluctantly, he stepped back onto the porch and closed the door, though I could feel his watchful eyes through the curtain. Gerald and I stood there in the quiet. Birds sang softly in the trees, the world around us calm in a way that didn't match the storm of memory between us. I see you kept the hearth going, Gerald said, looking toward the inn. You made it even more beautiful. I nodded. The house stood because the truth did. He smiled weakly. You always were stronger than me. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The years of anger, grief, and silence hung heavy, but something inside me eased. Sometimes closure doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in quiet mornings and tired voices and broken people trying to make peace. Finally, Gerald said, I'm living at a halfway home in town, doing carpentry work for a church. They let me build wooden benches. Every time I run my hand over the smooth wood, I think about our porch, about the boards we laid together in the summer of '85. His voice cracked again. I never should have left that porch, Marion. I swallowed hard, emotions tight in my chest. You made your choices, Gerald. We all pay for them in time. He nodded. I know. I just want to see you once more, to make sure you're safe, and to say goodbye. He turned to leave. But something inside me stopped him. Wait. He paused, his shoulders trembling slightly. I said softly, you don't need to run anymore. I'm not angry. I'm just tired. He turned slowly, tears streaming down his face. You have every right to hate me. I shook my head. I did. But hate takes too much space. I need room for peace. He looked at me as though those words broke something open in him. Then quietly he whispered, You're still the best person I ever knew. I didn't answer. Some things don't need replies. He placed his hat back on his head, nodded once, and walked down the path. As he disappeared beyond the pines, I felt a strange calm settle over me. When I went back inside, Noah was pacing near the kitchen. I can't believe you let him stand there, he said, frustration in his voice. He deserves nothing, Mom. I nodded gently. Maybe not, but forgiveness isn't for him. It's for us. Noah sighed, rubbing his forehead. You're too kind for your own good. I smiled faintly. Kindness isn't weakness, son. It's the hardest thing to hold after betrayal. That night, I sat by the fire, the silver brooch glinting softly on a table beside me. The flames flickered and danced, casting golden light on the walls. I whispered, maybe this house needed that moment to be complete again. The wind outside rustled through the pines almost as if the mountain was agreeing. Later, I wrote in my journal, today, forgiveness came in a brown coat. He walked away lighter. So did I. Days passed, calm and peaceful. Noah and Harper spent more time together, laughter echoing through the halls like music. Guests kept arriving, drawn to the warmth of the inn and the quiet peace that lived in its walls. Every morning, I made waffles and coffee for travelers who had no idea that this house had survived betrayal and fire. They just felt something safe here. Some called it charm. I called it healing. Then one afternoon, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Lieutenant Mateo Ramirez, the officer who had handled our case years ago. His letter was brief but formal. He wrote that Summit Vista Holdings had been under investigation for several other fraud schemes across the state. Your case helped us uncover a web of criminal operations, he wrote. Your courage started something bigger than you realize. My hand trembled slightly as I read those words. I hadn't thought about my story changing anything beyond my walls, but it had. Truth travels quietly, like sunlight through cracks. It spreads without asking permission. When I showed the letter to Noah, his eyes softened. Mom, you didn't just save our house. You saved others too. I smiled through tears. Maybe that's what the hearth was meant for, to keep more than one family warm. That night, I placed Ramirez's letter in a frame on the mantel beside the old black and white photo of the inn from 1924. The frame gleamed faintly in the firelight. I whispered to the photo, we did our part. Weeks turned into months. Life became beautifully ordinary again. Harper and Noah's bond grew stronger, and one bright spring morning, I found them sitting on the porch, hands intertwined, smiling like two people who had found something real after years of uncertainty. Harper looked up shyly. Mrs. Whitaker, she said, Noah and I have something to tell you. I already knew by the look in their eyes. You're getting married, I said, smiling wide. Noah laughed. We want to tell you first. We're not rushing, but it feels right. I felt my heart swell with a kind of joy I hadn't felt in years. You're bringing the hearth full circle, I whispered. The wedding was small and simple, held in the garden behind the inn. Sunlight filtered through the pine branches, and the scent of roses filled the air. Harper wore a pale blue dress, and Noah couldn't stop smiling. When they said their vows, I felt tears streaming down my face, not of sadness, but of gratitude. Life had broken me once, but here I was, surrounded by love, watching my son begin again. Guests clapped, music played, and laughter filled the yard. In that moment, I felt like every scar had finally found its reason. Later that evening, when everyone had gone inside for cake and dancing, I stood alone on the porch. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in soft orange and gold. The mountains stood tall and quiet, the way they always had. I whispered to the wind, it's done. The house has peace again. Then I felt a strange presence behind me. When I turned, I saw a young man standing by the gate, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. He looked hesitant and eyes kind, face unfamiliar. Mrs. Whitaker? He asked gently. I nodded. Yes? He took a step forward. My name's Daniel Miller. My heart skipped. Miller. Tess's last name. He smiled faintly. I'm her brother. The air stilled. The porch lights hummed softly, catching in the silver of my hair. What brings you here, Daniel? I asked carefully. He looked down, twisting the flowers in his hand. Tessa asked me to come. She's gone, ma'am. She passed away 2 weeks ago. The world tilted. I gripped the railing for balance. What happened? I whispered. His voice cracked. Heart condition. They said the stress caught up with her. She'd been volunteering at a rehab shelter for a year. She talked about you often. She said you were the first person who ever treated her like family. My throat closed. Tears blurred my vision. I whispered, she changed. Daniel nodded. She did. She left this for you. He held out a small, sealed envelope. I took it, my hands trembling. The paper was cream-colored, simple, with just my name written on the front in Tessa's careful handwriting. Daniel hesitated. She wanted you to know she found peace. His eyes filled with tears. She said the house you built taught her what home means. He turned to leave, but I stopped him. Wait. Would you like to come in? Have some tea? He smiled sadly. I'd like that. Inside, we sat by the fire. Daniel looked around, his eyes soft. "It's beautiful here," he said quietly. I nodded. "It's taken a long time to make it that way again." He glanced at the photos on the wall, his gaze landing on one of Tessa in her younger days, bright, smiling, unaware of the storm she would cause. "She wasn't all bad," he said softly. "She just got lost." I nodded. "We all do sometimes." After he left, I opened Tessa's letter. Her words were gentle and short. "Mrs. Whitaker, I don't deserve peace, but I found it by helping others. I hope you find it too. Thank you for teaching me that love isn't weakness, it's the strongest thing in the world." I folded the letter slowly, tears falling onto the paper. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, soft and forgiving. I placed the letter beside Gerald's old one in my drawer. Two stories that had once nearly destroyed me now rested side by side, not as wounds, but as lessons. That night, as the house grew quiet, I walked to the porch one last time before bed. The moon hung low over the ridge, silver light washing over the garden. I looked out at the roses, the same ones I had tended through every season of pain and hope. The breeze carried the scent of pine and memory. I closed my eyes and whispered, "They're all gone now." And yet, I'm still here. Behind me, the house creaked softly, like it was breathing. I realized something in that moment. The Blue Ridge hearth wasn't just my home. It was my witness. It had held every laugh, every tear, every betrayal, every apology. It had stood through storms, and now it stood through peace. The next morning, I made breakfast for the guests as usual. Harper helped, her laughter filling the kitchen. Noah joined us, stealing pieces of toast like he used to as a boy. The sunlight came through the windows, warm and golden. I looked at them both and smiled. "This is what the hearth was always meant to be," I said softly. Harper grinned. "What's that?" I smiled. "A place where even broken hearts can heal." But just when I thought the story had truly ended, a phone call came that would reopen the last door I thought had closed forever. A call from a lawyer in Charlotte about a document found in an old Summit Vista safe. It came early on a quiet Thursday morning. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, and the radio played a soft country song in the background. I was folding napkins when the phone rang. I wiped my hands on my apron and picked it up. "Mrs. Marion Whitaker?" a male voice asked. His tone was calm but formal. "Yes," I said carefully. "This is Peter Lowell, legal representative for the dissolution of Summit Vista Holdings. We're contacting you about an asset review. A document was discovered in a storage safe during liquidation." My heart tightened. "What kind of document?" I asked. There was a pause, paper shuffling. "It's a notarized letter addressed to you, dated the same week your husband's trial began. It appears to be from Tessa Miller." I went still. The room felt smaller. "A letter?" I whispered. "Yes, ma'am." It was sealed and marked personal. "Would you like it forwarded or open here for verification?" My throat felt dry. "Please read it," I said softly. The man cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitaker, if this letter is ever found, it means Summit Vista has fallen apart. I've left proof that what happened wasn't just a family betrayal. There's another name behind it, a man named Lyle Conrad, one of Summit Vista's senior partners. He orchestrated everything, including your husband's signing, the forgeries, and the shell accounts. Gerald and I were small pieces in his larger plan. If this ever reaches you, it means he's finally been caught. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." My knees almost gave way. "Are you saying there's someone else responsible?" The lawyer replied, "The FBI confirmed Mr. Conrad was indicted last week for multiple counts of property fraud. Mrs. Whitaker, your testimony years ago played a key role in building their case. You helped expose one of the largest real estate scams in the region." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The years of pain, the sleepless nights, the heartbreak, they had meant something beyond my porch. My small fight had grown into justice for hundreds. I pressed a hand to my chest. "Thank you for calling," I whispered. When I hung up, I just stood there, breathing slowly, letting the weight lift off me. Noah walked in, hair still messy from sleep. "Who was that?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "A lawyer. They found a letter from Tessa. Turns out there was a man above all this, someone who used everyone. Noah frowned. So Dad and Tessa weren't the only ones? I shook my head. No, but they paid their part. The rest has been taken care of. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. You did it, Mom. You saw it through. I closed my eyes, resting my head against his shoulder. Maybe it wasn't me alone. Maybe truth has a way of finishing what people start. That afternoon, I sat on the porch with a pot of peach tea, watching sunlight move across the garden. The roses were blooming again, thick, red, alive. Harper joined me, her notebook in hand. You look lighter, she said with a smile. I got closure today, I replied. She tilted her head. About what? I smiled softly. About everything. I told her the story of the call, the hidden truth, the years of fight that finally made sense. She listened quietly, then said, It sounds like you built more than an inn, Mrs. Whitaker. You built a legacy. Her words warmed me more than the tea. I looked out toward the mountains. Maybe legacy just means leaving behind something honest. That evening, Noah and Harper announced they were expecting their first child. I cried, deep, grateful tears that carried every year of loss and every moment of healing. The hearth that once saw betrayal was now waiting to welcome new life. Months passed gently. Seasons turned the way they always do. Autumn painted the trees in gold and red. Guests filled the rooms, laughter echoing down the hallways. The Blue Ridge hearthen became known not for its scandal, but for its soul. Travelers said they could feel peace in its walls, like the house itself breathed kindness. They left notes in the porch jar, small messages like found hope here, felt safe here, coming back next year. I kept every one of them. Sometimes at dusk, I'd walk the gravel path to the gate, the same gate where Gerald once stood, and where Tessa's brother delivered her final letter. I'd stop there, breathe the cool mountain air, and whisper, We're all forgiven now. A few months later, a plain envelope arrived in the mail, stamped from Raleigh. Inside was a certificate, State Historical Preservation Award, Blue Ridge Hearth Inn, recognized for cultural heritage and preservation through adversity. I held it in trembling hands and laughed softly. We made it, old house, I said. Noah hung the certificate beside the old black and white photo of Eliza Whitaker from 1924. You know, he said, if she could see this now, she'd be proud. I nodded. I think she already knows. Life slowed down beautifully after that. Harper managed the guest rooms, Noah ran the books, and I stayed in the kitchen, right where I belonged, kneading dough, humming to the rhythm of the house. Every morning, I watched the mist lift off the ridge and thanked the universe for letting me stay long enough to see peace return. One afternoon, while clearing the attic, I found the old camera Noah had used years ago to record the evidence. Its battery was long dead, but the SD card was still inside. Curiosity got the better of me. I charged it, sat at my desk, and pressed play. Grainy footage filled the small screen. Tessa and Gerald moving through the living room, whispering, unaware they were being recorded. I expected anger, but what I felt instead was distance, like watching strangers from another life. Halfway through the clip, Gerald looked toward the camera by accident. His face softened, almost regretful, as if even then he knew the truth would find him. I paused the frame and whispered, You found it, didn't you, Gerald? In the end, you did. I deleted the video. Some memories don't need to live forever. That night, I wrote my final journal entry. The hearth stands, the fire burns, and my heart, after everything, is finally still. I closed the notebook, placed it inside the brass box with Gerald's and Tessa's letters, and locked it. One day, Noah's child would find it and read about the storm their grandmother survived. Winter came early that year. Snow dusted the pine branches, and the inn looked like a postcard, warm lights glowing through frosted windows. Guests gathered by the fireplace, sipping cocoa, listening to the old record player hum. Harper decorated a small tree in the corner. Noah sat by her side, his hand on her growing belly. I stood near the doorway, watching them, my heart swelling with quiet joy. Later, when everyone went to bed, I stayed by the fire alone. The room was quiet except for the ticking clock and the crackling logs. I reached for the silver brooch on the mantel, the one Gerald had returned, and pinned it to my sweater. It caught the firelight and sparkled softly. I smiled. You made your amends, I whispered. Rest easy now. Outside, the snow fell heavier, coating the porch, the steps, the old wooden sign that read Blue Ridge Hearth Inn, a place to come home to. The wind moaned through the trees, but inside, everything was warm. As midnight neared, I stepped outside, letting snowflakes touch my face. The world was quiet, the kind of silence that only comes when everything painful has finally been spoken. I looked up at the stars and said, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, but to life itself, for breaking me, for teaching me, for giving me one last season of peace. Years later, when I'm gone, I hope travelers will still stop here, smell the cinnamon waffles in the morning, and feel what I fought for: the comfort of honesty, the strength of forgiveness, the warmth of a fire that never dies. And if they ever ask who kept the Blue Ridge hearth burning through all the storms, maybe someone will tell them about a woman named Marion Whitaker who lost everything and still chose to love the world anyway. The camera fades in your mind as the music swells, the crackle of fire, the whisper of wind through pine, and one last line that lingers like a soft breath. Some houses hold more than walls. They hold the proof that even after betrayal, hope can still find its way home. If you've been here through every part of my story, thank you for keeping me company by the fire. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what you believe makes a true home. And if this story warmed your heart even a little, leave a like, share it, and subscribe, because every time you do, you help this old hearth keep burning for one more night.